Okay, so like with all the other passages, in order to clarify the process of how you answer certain questions, we're not going to go over the questions in order. Instead, we're again going to go over them in groups based on how you approach answering the questions. So remember, with a paired passage, you want to read that first passage and then answer questions that are about the first passage only. And as you answer the questions, you'll get a better understanding of the passage. Then you read the second passage. And as you read that second passage, you have two jobs. One, understand the passage itself, and two, understand how the passage relates back to the first passage. So, to get us started, we are first going to go over the questions that ask about passage A only. So let's start with number 1. According to passage A, it would be reasonable to infer that the writer is concerned about. Well, this is really a great place to start because hopefully you can answer this question with your own words, right? What is the writer of passage A concerned about? Hopefully, when you finished reading the passage, you said, maybe with your brain voice, one sentence that sort of summarizes the main point of the passage. So we could maybe say that basically the writer of passage A is concerned that the central or federal government has a lot of power, maybe too much. So let's look through our answer choices and see which one fits our answer best. And there it is, choice B, the strength of the proposed federal government. Thus, we can just select choice B and move on. Next, we're going to look at questions 2 and 3 together because question 3 is actually asking you to select the best support for your answer to question 2, right? And remember, when you have these paired questions, you want to read the initial question and see if you know the answer. If you do, you select it and then go on to the next question and find the excerpt from the passage that best supports your answer, right? Doing them in order, 2 then 3. But if you're not certain what the answer is to the initial question, then you want to go to the places in the passage indicated in the evidence question, right? Which of these places helps you to find the answer to the initial question? So you would basically be answering question 3 before question 2. So let's start by reading the initial question. Number 2. According to passage A, if federal and state laws are in conflict with one another, which will take precedent? Okay, so this question is pretty straightforward. If you know what precedence means. Do you know what precedence means? Well, it looks a lot like precede, which means to come before, which is close, but it's not so much about which law comes first. So the question gives you a hint. It says, if federal and state laws are in conflict with one another. Okay, so then precedence really means which law takes priority. Okay, so once you're sure about the meaning of precedence, then you ought to be able to recall from the passage that the central or federal government has all the power, right? Not the states. So thus, choice A, the federal law will take precedence, is the best answer. So since you were able to answer question 2 without returning to the passage, we must look through the answer choices for question 3 and find the place in the passage that best supports the idea that federal law will take precedence. So let's look at the answer choices for number 3. And sometimes looking at the excerpt is enough to get a sense of whether it's the part of the passage that supports the answer. Other times, though, you might have to return to the passage and look at the excerpts within the context of the whole passage. After a quick look through these excerpts, we see that they all talk about laws and power. But we must remember, we're looking for the excerpt that supports the idea that federal law will take precedence. So choice A seems to focus on the fact that the Congress shall have the power to make all laws. Okay. And then choice B talks about how this Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. Okay. Well, this doesn't really tell us which law takes precedent if federal and state laws are in conflict with each other. Now, choice D is a little sneaky because it mentions this government is limited and then ends with some small degree of power is still left to the states. So this is an excerpt that helps us understand the notion that the federal government has more power than the states, but we are really looking specifically for support that federal law will take precedence. So let's look at choice C, and that the Constitution and laws of every state are nullified and declared void. Yeah, Do you see how in this excerpt it clearly supports the idea that federal law will take precedent over state laws? So choice C is the best answer. All right, let's move on to number 4. Passage A argues that the federal government has all of the following powers except 2. Okay, so for this question, we must look at the answer choices first. So let's see if there are any choices that we definitely remember the passage stating as powers that the federal government has, right? So from the previous question, we know that choice A, create laws, and choice D, carry out the laws, are definitely powers of the federal government. So choices A and D are out. As for the remaining choices, the question is really, do you remember? Do you know if the author mentioned that the federal government could create a court system, like choice B, or add additional branches of government, as in choice C? If you do not remember, then you need to go back to the passage to look for either a mention of the ability to create a court system or add additional branches of government. So let's go back to the passage. Right here, the first sentence of the passage says, this government is to possess absolute and uncontrollable power, legislative, executive, and judicial, with respect to every object to which it extends. So it mentions all the branches of government, and does it say anything about adding any other branches? Well, you need to ask yourself, do you really need to keep reading? Are you going to reread the entire passage? Or can you just accept that choice C, add additional branches of government, is not a power of the federal government and not worry about confirming that choice B, create a court system, is a power? Sometimes we just need to select the best answer, which in this case is choice C, and move on. Let's look at number 6. In passage A, the federal government is argued to have complete power because. Do you have an answer in mind as you read this question? I mean, maybe you have something vague, like federal government is argued to have complete power because the states have less power. So it looks like we need to review the answer choices and see if there's just any we can eliminate. Okay, choice A says it needs the intervention of the state governments. Okay, so we know this is incorrect because we know for sure that the states do not have any power, so we don't need their intervention. So choice A is out. Choices B, C, and D talk about the different branches of government. So does the passage maybe mention a particular branch as being the reason that the federal government is argued to have such complete power? Now remember, before returning to the passage, you must have a clear purpose, right? What are you looking for, or where do you think maybe you can find it? And since this passage is so short, the best approach is to really start at the beginning and look for a mention of one of the branches, right? Executive, legislative, or judicial, as the reason why the federal government has so much power. So let's see here. In the beginning of the paragraph it says, that the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution. Okay, so this looks a lot like choice C, which says Congress will have the power to make all laws that are necessary and proper. And so thus, choice C is definitely our best answer. All right, now let's look at number 5. In passage A, the word annihilated most nearly means. Okay, so again, we got a vocab and context question, and so we know that the first thing we need is context. So back to the passage. And it's right here. It is true this government is limited to certain objects, or to speak more properly, some small degree of power is still left to the states. But a little attention to the powers vested in the general government will convince every candid man that if it is capable of being executed, all that is reserved for the individual states must be very soon annihilated, except so far as they are barely necessary to the organization of the general government. Okay. Let's just try rereading the last part and see what word you might replace annihilated with. All right. All that is reserved for the individual states must very soon be, I know, it's tempting to say something like destroyed, but probably something more like overruled or invalidated probably fits the situation a little better. So let's look at our answer choices. We're looking for definitely something negative and maybe a choice which most nearly means overruled or invalidated. So choice A is incorrect because we want the opposite of created. Choice C, ignored, and D, questioned, are definitely negative, but they're not quite strong enough. So even if you're not sure what choice B, annulled, means, it is the last remaining choice. And to clarify, annulled means to void an agreement, which is really the same thing as overruled or invalidated. So thus choice B is definitely our best answer.